And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Tech Talk. I am your host, Matt Presti. Today's guest I met in Acapulco, New Mexico at the Anarchapulco event. Great guy, Justin Zalewski. Justin works as a healer, and his passion is helping people heal themselves from what allopathic medicine would call incurable diseases. He's an international speaker, a hypnotist, a NLP trainer, that is neuro-linguistic programming, the author of Thriving in a Toxic World, and is writing his second book at the moment called Awakening into Consciousness. A quote from Justin's website is as follows: "Science now has become a discipline that is so utterly corrupted and in most cases should be treated with the utmost skepticism and forensic evaluation. This is because science has become the go-to for whatever result you'd like to pay for. We truly have the ability to transcend this madness, and we the people are awakening. The time is now to reclaim our sovereign and inherent freedom and stand together in ethical rebellion." Justin's website is thrivinginaToxicWorld.com. I will put those links below this video and run them during the interview as well. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Justin Zalewski to the program. And welcome. How you doing, Justin?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Good deal. I just noticed in my opening intro there that I might have said Acapulco in Acapulco, New Mexico, which would be cool if it was that close, but actually it's a little bit farther away than that. But so yeah, welcome to Tech Talk. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the next edition. And I'm glad to welcome you to the podcast. Great to meet you in Acapulco, at Anarchapulco. And we had some really cool little chats prior to running to and fro for different things. But you volunteered there for the event this time. Is that correct?
Well, I actually decided that I was just going to go to the event and see what happened. And I just started speaking to somebody, and somebody then volunteered me.
Oh,
And
okay.
in the end, yeah, it worked out really well, and just lots of very wonderful synchronistic things happened. That just meeting lots of great people, and it was one of the really wonderful things that I noticed was somebody had lost their wallet, and for all these anarchists, it was returned to the reception, and the person got it back, and that happened 3 or 4 times with high ticket value items, where normally you think, I've lost it, it's never going to happen again, and that's the kind of world I want to live in. And I wouldn't really call myself an anarchist, but I can see that I've no desire to live in this system that they want to create for us, or the world that they think they want to shape for us, because it's total insanity. And I just see a lot of people out there at the minute that are hungry for change, hungry for answers, and no matter what, the world is changing, and you either have to adapt to it or you're going to get eaten and consumed by it.
Yeah, it's well put. And yeah, it was a really cool uh, thing that happened because there was gold in that wallet too, apparently.
Right.
And, just to know that, yeah, that is the kind of world. Wouldn't that be great if we could leave our wallets on the bar and use the restroom and come back and it's all still there? And
Mm-hmm.
that sort of is the gauge as to where humanity is. You could say it's sort of like a thermostat. But yeah, it's really great that, honesty is a voluntary thing. And obviously you were involuntarily volunteered to work the event, but I wouldn't have met you otherwise because you were sort of at the welcoming gate when I was coming through and we started talking, and really interesting conversations. And I'm really curious to get into your work. Now, you've done a ton of stuff as a healer. Your passion is helping people heal. I did watch one of your talks in Ireland that you gave back in 2018. Allopathic medicine, you call it out. You call it, as well as others, incurable diseases, which we're sort of in that, allopathy is what my lovely Lori likes to call the death care industry.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you give us a little bit of history as to how did you get into the profession or the art of healing, and what made you want to get into it? Where did it
So
begin for you?
I suppose all my life I've always been trying to figure out what was been really going on, because the world, it didn't make sense to me. I remember being at school when I was maybe 6 or 7, and they were carrying or organizing charities to collect money for the black babies. And they said that there was enough food in the world to feed everybody, but still there was thousands of children starving every day. And that really just never ever resonated with me. How could we live in a world that's like that? And like the people that sort of you meet at an Acapulco and those places, we're all black sheep, but we're all a black sheep family where, we realize that what we've been fed all our lives is utter nonsense or bullshit. And, when you see that things don't add up, what you're being told and what you actually experience were two different things. And I really struggled with trying to make sense of the world when I was younger. And one of the things that I absolutely hated was going to school. I couldn't believe that my parents would send me to such a horrible place. So initially, I got caught when I was 10 years of age drinking alcohol in school.
Oh
And then,
man.
and then I remember when I was 13, sniffing glue on the way to school on the bus. And then I suppose I started in the magic mushrooms at 16. And then I went on to Heish, maybe when I was 20. And then, all the cocaine, the ecstasy, the LSD and all that sort of stuff. But, I've went along, and to me, my journey in searching for what I thought was the truth, you know, I did use a lot of substances. And for me, I thought they were incredibly beneficial. But I also want to be very clear that if anybody ever does want to walk down that path, I think they should, if you are taking any substances, and I think that most people shouldn't take them, because if you're using them to mask something that's not right within yourself, or you're in an unresourceful state, or you've got some deep amount of stress or trauma, they're really bad vehicles to use to try and escape from that. So if you are taking anything, I think it's important that you're in a good place emotionally, that you're around people that you trust, and that you're in an environment that is safe. And if you want to do that, I think it's great. But I really sort of walked that path as long as I could. And I suppose in 2003, I really started to take it seriously. I started then. I was fortunate. I had a company that sort of made me a lot of money, so I was able to go and do different seminars. And my criteria for learning anything is always to find the best person on the planet at what they do and go and learn from them, because that person could teach you something in 20 minutes that took them 30 years to perfect. And to me, it's just good to sort of compress those decades into days or into minutes. And that's sort of the path that I walked. And I get there, I think, a lot quicker than if I had a just sort of did the trial and error thing.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Tell us about the book Thriving in a Toxic World. What was your inspiration to want to write that?
So I had all these ideas bouncing around my head, and the stuff that I was looking at and what I was being told in the world didn't add up. So initially, naively, very naively, I thought I was going to write a book about nutrition. But when I started researching what was really going on, uh, I just saw this information that was completely contradictory. And what I started to realize is the agencies that were there to protect us were absolutely corrupt and rotten to the core. The advice that they gave, I knew would have caused illness and disease, and that it seemed that they were uh, protecting the pharmaceutical industry and the food industry at the expense of the people. And it took me a long time to sort of go through that mass confusion, because there was so much data that was confusing me. But eventually, I just realized that all the regulatory agencies, like the CDC, the FDA, the WHO, the MHRA, which is the Medical Health Regulatory Authority in the UK, and the European, I can't remember the agency, it's a European Food Standards Agency or something like that, and they were all completely corrupt and rotten to the core. And the one thing that I really noticed was the American Dietetic Association, which changed its name. I can't remember the name it changed to, but they were promoting all these horrible things that were really harmful to your health. And then at one of their annual conferences, they were uh, having McDonald's actually provide the food for the conference. Now I just realized this system's so corrupt and so rigged. And even the criteria to join to become a member, basically it was, you're not allowed to think for yourself. Anything that you do has to be what serves the society. And in the end, I just realized that that whole system was totally corrupt and rotten to the core. And like, people now can see that the CDC, the FDA, who are supposed to regulate these lethal injections and stuff and make sure they're safe, and they were doing anything but that, and they were promoting things that were absolutely known to cause cancer. And when I saw that, I just started to write and write and write, and it took me probably nearly 8 or 10 years to write that, because I went after them and I called them out for exactly what they were. And so I didn't want to say anything that I couldn't back up with absolute factual information. And then I do have my opinions about them, but that was sort of the main driver for me to do that. And I mean, it was a very enjoyable process. It just took longer than I thought.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. And myself, I back in 2001, two, somewhere in there, I really went on my first out of the box, was 98 with UFO research and
Hmm.
uh, stuff like that, aliens, blah blah blah. When I first got the internet, that was what I started looking at. After 2001, 9/11, discovering building 7, basically at the advice of a friend, I take a look at it. Then it began to be, almost immediately conspiracy and health tied together for
Hmm.
me. So I started reading about milk. I quit drinking milk in 3 weeks of literally, I drink half a gallon of milk a day. I could show you a picture of my driver's license from 2001, and I look sick, like
Yeah.
really like fat and sick. I weighed 100 or 230 pounds, was just, just lethargic, no energy, and so this health and conspiracy thing went together for me. Started reading about MSG, started reading, notmilk.com. I think people probably remember that, who are as old as we are.
Hmm.
Um, High fructose corn syrup was a big one, and studying Donald Rumsfeld with GE Searle and company, who in 1980, the early 80s, late 70s, were you're looking for a sweetener to replace sugar,
Yeah.
and it happens to be something that is so toxic to the system that the body pushes it into a fat cell, because it's such a super sugar that it can't digest it.
Hmm.
And about the same time, you see the obesity rates begin when Coke, the new Coke, comes out in 1984, and everybody loses their shit because it tastes like garbage. So they go back to the original classic, but it still has high fructose corn syrup in it. They just tweaked other things to make up for the lack of its taste. So that all made sense, and why the obesity rates coincided with the introduction of high fructose corn syrup. And then aspartame, Sweet Misery. I remember passing out a ton of those DVDs when I got my DVD burner, 1 to 7 DVD burner in 2007, and just started handing out DVDs like candy. It was really, I was motivated by health, because I could see not only when I changed my own dietary habits, how my own health improved, because that was the big thing. And that's what makes you want to say, people, I see that you're in a state of lethargy. You're pale. You look like you don't feel good, and you're my friend. So here's some stuff. Look at this stuff. And you can only do what you can. Plant seeds, not forests. But I think we all have a story of coming out of, at least for me, a state of poor health, and eventually getting to where I'm at today, which is the best I've ever felt in my life. I do the gym 3 times a week, so it's important to me to keep a sort of a
Hmm.
routine for my health going. What do you advise for people who want to come into a more holistic approach to their own health? What is a good place to start for them, and what can inspire them to get into their own regiment of taking their own health into their own hands?
So for me, I mean, the first thing that I think is really important is like, so I'll just to give you an idea, I work with people a lot, with hypnosis, NLP, trance sometimes, and I will give them substances to alter their consciousness and stuff, just depending on who they are and where they're at. But to me, like, when you ask people what are your values in life, they'll tell you family, happiness, good job, a good relationship. And sometimes in somebody's top 5 values, they won't have health. And in your hierarchy of values, if health is not your number one value, you'll chase the money or the happiness or whatever it is. And people say, but is it not more important to be happy than it is to be healthy. And I says, well, there's people that are incredibly obese that are incredibly happy, or they think they're happy, or they tell themselves they're happy. But to me, the foundation is your value must, if you make health your number one value, that foundation and everything on top of it can be built. The other thing as well is that we're so bombarded by environmental pollutants, electromagnetic radiation, the food. I mean, you look at the world we live in, the air that we breathe with chemtrails and stuff, the food that our or the soil that our food's grown in, and the water that we drink. You know, in some states, especially in the US, there's something like testing like 42 pharmaceutical drugs in their water. You know,
Right.
so you can't drink the tap water. You have to have a high quality water filter so that you're not filtering those toxins through your body. Uh, you must eat really good, high quality, nutritious food, and you must detoxify your body. And just like if you're an average person and you've never cleaned your liver, you're going to have a minimum of 500 to 1,000 stones the size of peas or bigger in your liver and gallbladder. And so doing a liver cleanse is an incredible way to boost your health. And but the most important thing of all is, where do you live emotionally? If you don't believe you're a good person, or God's punishing you, or you deserve to be punished, or whatever belief system you have, and most people are living a lifestyle with a belief system that will end up eventually making them sick. I mean, the statistics now, they were saying that 1 in 2 were going to get cancer. Now it's like basically everybody's going to get cancer. But that's a statistic that you don't need to be part of if you make some small, intelligent lifestyle choices. And you really do need to get out in fresh air. You need to walk. You need to drink the water. You need to eat the good food. You need to detoxify and clean up that emotional stuff. And if you do that, you're setting up yourself a foundation to have, a much healthier life. But the problem is that so much of the food that people are eating that they believe is healthy is actually poisoning them, and that's where they get caught in the nutrition trap. And for example, like years ago, it took 120 days for a chicken to reach maturity. Now they do it in 42 days.
Right.
How do they do it in 42 days? By the magic of science. They use growth promoters, antibiotics, steroids, and hormones. And then
Mhm.
what you'll find is you'll end up with boys uh, at 9 years of age have got bigger breasts than the girls. And so that stuff's getting into their bodies. And
Right.
like if and that this is a thing, then you think that's bad about the chicken. Then with McDonald's, they then mechanically extract the chicken off the carcass so there's nothing goes to waste. And when they do that, it turns into a pink sludge.
Right.
Turns into a pink sludge. Then they bleach it white, and then they use a chemical called dimethyl polysiloxane, which is a thing that you find in silicone greases and caulks and stuff like that. It
Yeah.
definitely does not belong in the human body, and so they then feed that shit to their kids. And
Yeah.
to me,
Chicken
it's just
nuggets.
yeah, it's just a complete poison. And
Yeah.
and people are drinking even water. They're drinking water out of plastic bottles, but when you drink out of plastic bottles, there's a chemical in it called bisphenol A, or BPA for short,
Mhm.
and then that there is getting into your body, and it's then affecting your endocrine system, and your endocrine system basically tells your hormones and stuff what to do. And so what happens is we end up then becoming very estrogen dominant, or the chemicals mimic that we get too much estrogen. So what you find with a lot of men now is they go to the doctor, they've low sex drive, they're actually struggling to get erections, and it's not that they don't have don't have enough testosterone. It's that they have far too much estrogen or estrogen mimicking chemicals, and so it's basically feminizing men. And for women, women have a battle between estrogen and progesterone, and what
Mhm.
happens is that they then become estrogen dominant, and so their body gets knocked out of balance, and that makes them more prone to breast cancers, breast lumps, ovarian cysts, and stuff like that. So we need to get off the plastics as well, get those out of the system, and then cleanse the system. And it's not that one of these things is going to make a difference. It's I could suggest 100 things, and the more of them you do, the more you're going to set the game up to win. And
Yeah.
just to give you an example, for me, because health is very high on my value list, it's the highest value. So I'm up at 6 a.m. every single morning. As soon as I get out of bed, I will then go to the bathroom. I'll go and drink a pint of warm water. I then walk for 35 minutes around the hills. I just live on the verge of the countryside. And even today, I mean, it was so wet and so blowy that even with an umbrella, and I rarely take an umbrella, but it was that wet, my socks, my shoes, my pants, my shirt, and everything got soaking wet. But I still, because it's worth the effort, then
Yeah.
I come back. And I mean, I do the gym 7 days a week, but I'm only doing 20 to 30 minutes max every
Right.
day. Then when I come back from the gym, I have a sauna in my house, so I do a sauna every day for 35 to 40 minutes.
Mhm.
And then when I get out of that, I then meditate for an hour to an hour and a half. So that takes me up to about, 10:30. And to me, I've just set my life up that I spend 9 hours a day working on me every day. That's just how I set it up. 8 hours a day working on whatever I want, and then 7 hours a day sleeping. And that's how I structured. But to me, I mean, a lot of people may not have the luxury to be able to do that. But to me, I want to live to 150. A lot of people, I know, but the thing is, like any other creature in nature, usually lives 7 times what it takes to reach adulthood. So if a chicken takes, say, 6 months to reach maturity, it should live for 3.5 years. If a dog takes it to get to two, it should live for 14 years. So biologically, say we don't mature until we're 20, you know, uh, we should be living to 140, but the environmental toxins, the pollution, the electromagnetic radiation, and the other thing that's a huge thing that really triggers so many illnesses is stress. People are living with incredible levels of stress, and it's been normalized, and we need to get off that treadmill, that hamster wheel. And people just keep going and going and going and going, and that wheel gets cranked up faster and faster, and people now just work only to pay bills and have actually no quality of life in many cases. And we have to break that vicious cycle and stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I think as well, we look at things from the toxic perspective. Toxins are cumulative, but so
Mhm,
are health. Health effects and steps towards your health are also cumulative. So the
mhm,
more you do of them, even nobody can just start out with the 100 points of health light, right? And just say, I'm going to completely 180 degrees from the direction I was going. My personal recommendation is, people need to slowly but deliberately wean themselves off of their bad habits, if you
mhm,
will. Get to the point of, it's called implementing the oracles of Delphi. Know thyself, your limits, your loves, your passions. But
mhm,
also, the second pillar is, uh, but none to excess. In
mhm,
other words, don't indulge, and that's the danger. A lot of us get into indulgences, and not to say that binge watching a series isn't fun once in a while, but if
mhm,
you binge watch series all year long, you're going to end up fat, sick, lazy, and stuck in your easy chair. So
mhm,
you gotta start with some kind of protocol. Start with one thing. Cut out the fast food, for instance. And I'm hardcore about that. In 2002, when I started researching health, I quit milk. 3 weeks later, my chronic sinus infections disappeared for
mhm,
good. They didn't come back. Minus an occasional flu here or there, which is really, in my opinion, just a purge of your system. Every
mhm,
so often, we have to purge things out. That's before I discovered fasting and things like that. But all learning is cumulative as well, and knowledge is cumulative. So it's to be considered, wise to not want everything at once, but to build toward those things in cumulative steps. Everything you work toward with knowledge behind you takes you a step further, and that knowledge comes closer to you until it becomes yours and you can employ it. So back to the liver, you mentioned, what, in your opinion, is the best way to cleanse the liver?
So to me, there's a 7 day liver cleanse. I mean, I came across it maybe 10 or 15 years ago by a guy called Andreas Moritz. He's no
Okay.
longer with us, but a beautiful soul. And so I tried it the first time, and I got about 300 stones. And I mean,
Wow.
I'd been living the size of peas and some of them were bigger, but I'd been leading a very, very clean life. Like I'd been doing green juices, meditations, really clean, or almost anything that I eat would be organic. Uh, and going to the gym, doing stuff. So I was leading what I would class as an incredibly healthy life. And I still had that accumulation that built over the years. Now I do one every single year after Christmas, just because Christmas week, I just enjoy and I enjoy the stuff. So to
Sure.
me, I mean, I only eat twice a day as well. I mean, I only eat at 12 o'clock and I eat maybe before 5 o'clock. So I fast for 19 hours a day every day.
Hmm.
I've been doing that for at least 10 years, maybe more. And I find that it allows me to absolutely thrive. And, I can go, like, there's times I've went for a 10-year period and not even had as much as a sniffle. But, I
Hmm.
really do listen to my body. But the thing is that so in our society, we're trained to seek instant gratification. And the problem with that is that especially if you get sick, you want to get healed instantly or you want to do something. So what the pharmaceutical industry have done is trained everybody to go looking for their quick fix instantly. I mean, you look at any movie that somebody's having a psychotic episode and the next thing they pop open the medicine cabinet, they pop two pills in them and they calm down after 10 seconds. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like that can't work and it
The
doesn't work.
Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde approach, right?
Yeah. And I mean that's complete and utter insanity. But the thing is, when most people get a headache, what do? They usually take two painkillers and shoot the messenger and think that that's a problem solved. That's like you driving down the road in your car and the oil light comes on. You take the bulb out and think that's that problem solved.
Right.
You're not getting the feedback anymore, but there's still stuff going on in your body that what happens next is then your unconscious, which always wants to protect you, will then have to amplify the signal to get through. And so what you'll see with people is they'll be on stronger and stronger and stronger medications and their body's screaming at them to rectify the problem. And what they do is they mask it. And your unconscious mind always wants to do what's best for you if you give it choices. But the thing is that most people don't have very good rapport with their unconscious mind. And so they end up shooting a messenger rather than listening to it. And I can go, I mean, maybe 20 years ago, maybe more than 20 years ago, I actually got all the mercury taken out of my teeth. And to get that taken out, you have to do it in a there's a very strict protocol that must be followed. And if you don't, you could end up causing way more damage than good.
Hmm.
Uh, but I was able to get all that completely removed. And I'm talking at least maybe 12 fillings. My teeth were
Dude,
just,
I had exactly 12 too, and I got them removed within the last couple years, and it
yeah.
was a lengthy process. But I do got to say that just those particles of mercury do collect in the heart, the
Hmm.
liver, things like that. But
Hmm.
afterwards, within a couple months, it's like I felt an improvement, honestly, because I would have certain things that were weird about, rhythms, just heart rhythms, things like that. But
Hmm.
a lot of those things cleared up for me because of that. And I've
Hmm.
heard guys talk about how important that is. And I finally, you know, and it wasn't as costly as a lot of people say. It's tens of thousands of dollars. I actually did it for probably under $4,000,
Hmm.
and you get on a payment plan. But I'll tell you what, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. I feel great again, with just something like that. But you mentioned the pills. People take a couple pills and the headache goes away, but it's an indicator. It's kind of like if Jung was to give that a term, it would be called persona medicine,
Hmm.
right? Because you're just like, of course, a Tessarian would say that, look at America, it's the most anti-psychological country in the world. We just take a persona medication to mask the true
Hmm.
pain.
Hmm.
So that's a big deal in the world today, is that we've grown up. And as you said in your quote on the about section of your site, which I'll bring up here in a second, let me go ahead and pull up your actual website banner here. But you said this: people science has become a discipline that is so utterly corrupted because science has become the go-to for whatever result you'd like to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have not witnessed that in the past 4 years, trust the science, my
Mm-hmm.
God. So tell us about what you thought about the whole COVID scam, and where do you lie on that side? What side, how do you view that whole operation?
So
And
initially, I mean, I'd come through like the AIDS, the swine flu, the Ebola, and I had flown to Australia in February 2020 to give a talk in February and March. And when I was on the plane from Dubai to Adelaide, somebody got really sick in the plane, and it actually looked like the guy was going to die. But
hmm,
then about 2 hours before we landed, they'd called for a doctor and stuff like that. And he was maybe like 3 rows in front and across, and they're like the 10-seater planes, the big ones. But in the end, before we landed, he seemed to make a miraculous recovery, but they wouldn't let us off the plane. And they had to come in and check him for about 20 minutes. And then after that, they let us all off. But, so that was the first true impact of any pandemic or any event, health emergency that had ever happened. And so at the time, I thought, well, maybe something has happened because they'd never done it to this extreme before, and I'd come through many of them. And I mean, I know that I had already been calling the WHO out at least maybe 10 years before the coronavirus thing had happened. And initially, at the very start, I thought maybe something has happened. This is the thing. We live in a world where something could genuinely happen. But after a short period of time, I just started to see that all these experts, all these different people, that were all the synchronization of that message was so scripted globally on every channel throughout the world that there's no way that could have ever happened organically. And to me, after a short period of time, I realized that we're completely dealing with criminals. I mean, I personally
yeah,
wouldn't take a vaccine of any kind for any
mhm,
reason at any time, including giving it to any animal.
mhm,
And so when I started to look at more and more information, more data, and different people were talking, like if there was true science out there, true science allows healthy debate. Like we may not agree on stuff, but we would still be willing to listen to each other's perspective, put our perspective across, and what might be very good for you may not be good for me, and vice versa. But the thing is, at least we're willing to debate it and have different perspectives. But the World Health Organization, the FDA, the CDC, they were all saying safe and effective about these lethal injections. How could something be safe and effective when you understand the process of what it takes to get a drug to market? You're talking maybe 400 million or 500 million dollars for all the clinical trials to do stuff, and that usually takes 5 to 10 years, and those trials are so corrupt anyway. And there's like, I mean, I can't remember the statistics, but there's a huge amount of drugs that were marked as safe, and then a short while later they were completely pulled because there were so many adverse effects. And I wrote about this in the book. Like, what they'll do is they'll go and get somebody that's a leader in whatever field they want in medicine, say an oncologist, and the oncologist is at the top of his game. And then what they'll say is, could you come and give a talk to us at this symposium? We'll pay you $100,000. They will wine and dine him. They'll pay for his flights. They'll do it in an exotic location where it's nice and sunny. They'll hire ex cheerleaders and models, and the guy then gets used to the money, and then what they do is they get him to say, look, could you recommend this drug for us? And then they bring him on as an advisor or different things, and they have massive
mhm.
conflicts of interest. And basically what they do is they pay influencers in the medical world to say anything they want. And when you start to look at the data, it's so corrupted, it's so pre-scripted, and it's written in such a way that even science doesn't write like that. That's a marketing uh, uh, I'm trying to think of the word when those peer-reviewed studies, a lot of those are written in a way that they're written for marketing, not for the scientific community. And the
Right,
science is so corrupt that if a scientist is saying anything about anything, if he's not allowed to be questioned on the science, it's not science, it's propaganda.
right. Well, I cut my teeth on analyzing conspiracy, the science around 9/11,
Hmm.
which I'm so thankful that I took that on because
Yeah.
you don't get sharp, you don't grow discernment until you, and I think that's sort of what, if conspiracy had a purpose, my definition of that purpose would be to create the criticality of discernment within a human being. Because when you discover that people are lying to you,
Hmm.
people that live in this world right now at this very moment are telling you things that are blatant, total, 100% falsehoods, then
Hmm.
you start to understand that I need to armor up a little bit. And that's like the spiritual armor. You dispel shadow with light. Shadow cannot dispel shadow, but light can dispel shadow. And we
Hmm.
have that ability. Then, when I got into Walter Russell's work in 2008, I started to see, oh my God, the whole entire field of physics is only half right. Yet
Hmm.
they assert their laws, which now I'm happy to say I've witnessed literally 6 laws of physics broken,
Hmm.
and I will get into that another day. But the point is that calling these things laws when they aren't,
Hmm.
and once you understand that it's not just medical science, it's the science of, let's say, the physics, the physical, not necessarily the physical sciences, because there are some very incredible sciences and scientists that have provided and made life easier for all of us. But there are also those elements, those nefarious elements that seek control, that seek to dominate how people view their universe and their world. And physics is definitely one of them, especially when you hear guys like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who has no business commenting on medicine whatsoever,
Hmm.
saying that only consensus matters. The
Hmm.
individual scientist, we should push him out of the way because he doesn't matter. Yet the individual scientists are the very people who started your religion, Neil. you know
Hmm.
so scientism really has become sort of a cult like uh, organization of members only, if you will. And if you're not in the membership, if you're not on the rolls, you don't get the front row parking spot, you don't get the house with the swimming pool, and you certainly don't get written in any of the journals if you're like a Velikovsky or a Russell or a Tesla who
Hmm.
disagrees with the direction they're going. So it's the same for the medical world. And you nailed it. I mean, you said that science is the go-to for whatever result you'd like to pay for. And you can look at the movie The Insider for more on that, with the whole tobacco industry creating
Hmm.
genetically modified tobacco to increase the levels beyond the safety limits to make it more addictive, when
Hmm.
nicotine is one of the most beneficial herbs on the planet if used
Hmm.
correctly. So we really need to get back, take it back however many decades you need to, and redo things. It's within our capability to question, to not believe the things that the authorities say, question authority, always think for yourself. And I think that's scary for a lot of people, especially when you look at the men in the white robes, the scientists and the doctors, who are
Hmm.
now the new priesthood, if you will. So you got
Absolutely.
your you got your gatekeepers. How do you get around these guys? What is Justin's best advice to get around these guys?
So first of all, to me, I just in general, I mean, I remember, I mean, I used to also have a company where I sold superfoods online, and I had 150 products of my own brand. And so my criteria about supplements and stuff like that is very high. And so even things when you see, like, I remember once seeing, I mean, I was on Facebook years ago, but I remember seeing this doctor promoting supplements. And I just thought, well, if the doctor's promoting it, that means a higher level of scrutiny right away than a regular guy, because, he's going to have that indoctrination. To me, that whole system, the pharmaceutical industrial complex is, I mean, it's like you'll see people like mass murderers, like you'll see, and this is just when I'm writing. One of the chapters in the book I'm writing now is called "The Death of Allopathic Medicine," and that system. People believe in many cases that the doctor knows best, or the doctor is God. And the thing is, if you get sick, the last person you should ever go and see is a doctor, especially if you get cancer. I mean, this will sound like a very bold statement, but in my experience, cancer is not that difficult a disease to heal from if you do the right thing at the right time. But the thing about it is, and I have had the opportunity to work with many people who've had cancer. And I can tell you within probably a 3 minute conversation whether that person is going to live or die. And if they believe the guy in the white coat knows best, they're just going to get cut, poison, or burned. And this is the thing. Chemotherapy is proven, it's documented it causes cancer. Radiotherapy is documented causes cancer. And in many cases, they will cut the tumor out. And this is the thing that I remember years ago, I used to do a show on natural health radio, but what had happened was the woman had got so bombarded all the time by trolls at the end she gave up. But I remember doing one of the shows, and it was how to reduce the risk of breast cancer by 95%. And so this is the thing, is that that system is so funneled that if anybody gets ill, they're only forced down the allopathic road, and anybody else that would try to help it. In the UK, under the 1939 Cancer Act, it's illegal to say that you can cure cancer. So you will be prosecuted for saying you can cure cancer. And the Medical Health Regulatory Authority in the UK went after a guy called David Noakes, who had outstanding results at healing people from cancer using GCMAF, but then they come after him, and then they said what he did was criminal, and they end up taking his house off him under the Proceeds of Crime Act and all this stuff. Real barbaric stuff.
Mm.
It's in the States. I don't know if you know of the police doctor Stanislav Brzezinski in Texas. The Texas Medical Board had him up in front, I think, of 2 or 3 grand juries, tried to take his license off him because he had this thing called anti-neoplastones. And he was
Right.
getting phenomenal results. And even if he gave you the treatment and it didn't work, it didn't leave you feeling ill. And he had things like with people with brain tumors and cancers and stuff like that. And like, if you came up with a cure for cancer that cost $1 and guaranteed you'd never have it again, like, you would be assassinated if they couldn't buy that off you, because the cancer industry alone is so corrupt and so rotten to the core. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry,
Right.
and they're never going to let go of the money that they're getting from that. And that whole system, I mean, people don't realize, but the education system's being weaponized, the medical system, the food system, the transport system, anything that matters to your freedom in this life is completely controlled by these select few people at the top. And that system is so egregious and so extreme that we need to sort of try to find a way to get out of that. So for me, I personally don't comply with any of it. I
Mhm.
haven't seen my doctor in probably 30 or 40 years, other than at one stage I used to fly helicopters, so you had to go and get a medical before you would be allowed out on your own
Physical. Yeah. Yeah.
and stuff like that. Or I also had a license. I did it when I was 21 to drive, the big articulated lorries.
Mhm.
But once you hit 45, they think that you're not going to be fit enough to do that because you could have some medical conditions. So in the end, uh, I had to do a medical as soon when I hit 45 to start doing this every 5 years to retain that license. Although I've never used it once, I just would like to have the option that if I want to drive anything, I can. But
Right.
to me, we have to stop using that allopathic medicine system. It's so broken, it's so dysfunctional. And like, I can't remember what year it was, but many years ago, there was all these doctors, they went on strike. And when they went on strike, the death rate for people dying in hospitals plummeted.
Dropped.
Yeah, because the doctors weren't working on them. And
Yeah.
like, seriously, like, to me, I mean, and I want to give a balanced perspective. There are some doctors out there that are beautiful souls, that are really sincere and really, really want to help you. But in a lot of cases, they can be very sincerely wrong because they're prescribing treatments that they're only allowed to choose from in that spectrum of the allopathic medicine world. And like, I remember many years ago, I got a infection in my finger, and I went to the hospital 3 days in a row, and they said, "No, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay." Then on the fourth day, I went back, and they says, "No, you have to go to the theater right away." So they took me in the theater, and they cut this big thing about the size of a dime out of my finger,
Mm.
and but they wouldn't let me out of hospital at night, and the next day they come around and they want to give me the food, and I just wouldn't eat the shit. It was just pure shit. So I got the doctor. I had to wait. The consultant was coming around. So I walked down to him and I still had the cannula in my arm, in case they needed to shoot anything into me. And I says, look, I accept full responsibility for my actions, and anything that happens when I'm out of here is my responsibility. And then he agreed to let me go home. So I went home, got my good food, and then went
Mhm.
back to the hospital. And then after a few hours, they did all the checks and then they let me home. But
Right.
the food's not fit for human consumption.
Right.
And that whole system, we need to start making intelligent choices. Don't use allopathic medicine. Research about how basic, simple principles work. The thing is, people think that if they get sick and they think they've got the best healthcare insurance in the world, like that's probably the worst thing you could have. And that sounds probably bizarre to many Americans that want good insurance. Like when I travel all around the world, I would never take out insurance ever. I mean, I live in my home. I don't insure my home. I only insure my car because it's a law, and I don't want to fight with that yet. But that's a battle further down the road.
Right.
But to me, it's understanding the mechanics of how your body work, and it's actually quite simple. It's the noise out there to keep you confused, thinking that you must give your authority over to an expert, and you are your own highest authority at all times, whether in health or the law. And you can take this person's advice, but to me, look for if you're trying to get healthy, look for a model of excellence. Find somebody that's an absolute master at what they do, and find and replicate it. But when we get sick, uh, that pharmaceutical model, all it does is mask symptoms. It never treats the cause. And when I work with people, I always go to the cause. And when you deal with the cause, in many cases, you can reverse diseases that are, I mean, my real passion is incurable diseases. And to me, when you work with people that have been told, have been given these incurable disease, or that they've been diagnosed with these incurable diseases, what it usually means is that there's no profit in trying to work with that disease that you have. And like the simplest things really do work. But the thing is that, like, I remember doing a talk years ago. It was for a group that was promoting hemp in Ireland. And one of the things that we're doing was like the Rick Simpson oil. And one of the things that I see so much with these people is that they will take this oil, and then it gives them a license to behave irresponsibly. They're still drinking, they're still smoking, they're still taking sugar, they're still stressed, they're still not exercising. And so it's like, it's not that this one, I mean, I do think that the cannabis oil is incredibly therapeutic and beneficial, but you have to do all the other things as well. This is not a license to behave irresponsibly and think, well, I'm doing this so that gets me out of jail free. It doesn't. And even if you're eating organic food and you don't smoke and you don't drink, you could still get sick because the environment is so toxic. The EMFs are so extreme. And if you're doing stress is a really destructive thing in your body, because when you get stress, you produce adrenaline and cortisol. Your body is going into fight or flight, thinking there's something that's going to come and get you. And the problem with that is your body, to conserve energy, will then shut down your immune system because it won't matter for a few minutes, and it'll start to shut down your elimination system. But the thing is, that's okay in the short term. But if you're doing that for days or weeks on end or months, eventually you have a completely compromised, suppressed immune system. And then all those critters can get out of control. And people are just loaded with parasites as well. And there's just so many layers to health. Learn about your health. And when you learn how it works, you'll realize that health is not that complicated, but you must be disciplined. And most importantly of all, clean up the trauma, because people eat for comfort and they justify their reasons for doing it with logic.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Totally. Said a lot of great points there. The only defense that I would offer to allopathy, and this
Hmm.
comes from experience, but also being a first responder, is trauma care.
Yeah,
Emergency room
I
care. So
no,
go
I
ahead.
actually want to address that. Yeah, because to me, like if you fall off your motorcycle, and I have had that experience before when I've got broken up really badly. They are absolutely magnificent at what
Isn't
they
that?
do.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely incredible. The ambulance drivers keeping you alive and keeping you stable and getting you to the emergency room, they are magnificent and they are
Mhm.
absolute masters. And that's where they absolutely excel. And I want to acknowledge that because they are really good at
Agreed.
that. It's
Yeah.
when you get the diseases and the
Hmm.
diabetes, the heart disease, and all these other things. This is where the problems start. But in the context, emergency room medicine is absolutely magnificent, and I'm
Yeah.
very appreciative and grateful to all those wonderful people in that part of the allopathic medicine system that does outstanding work.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And as you said, concerning authority, I think there's that divide, of course, you have the physical medicine,
Hmm.
which you could say trauma control, call it what you will, but setting
Hmm.
a bone, for instance, patching up burns with silver cream, things like that. And they are really equipped to handle that stuff. And it's really great that they're able to, because I've been on some scenes where, there's cuts, scrapes, and sometimes worse, but having that ability to get that treatment for a traumatic situation is imperative. But when we get into the dark, into the gray zone, that's when we start dealing with health. And here's one of the things too. You might go to the ER for let's say, leg injury or finger injury or something. Next thing you know, they want to run 10 tests on you to test you for stuff you're not even there for. And then the doc's telling you, oh, you've got advanced pancreatic cancer or something.
Hmm.
And so you got to be careful, because there's always that want to do bait and switch thing. But
Hmm.
as you mentioned concerning authority, I thought of this quote, can't remember who it's by, but basically, media destroys information, doctors destroy health, academia destroys knowledge, priesthoods destroy religion, and central banks destroy wealth, and lawyers destroy justice. So we
Hmm.
really are in times that are upside down, but it doesn't mean that we can take off these personas, we can turn things around for ourselves. But I think what that requires is the bravery and the fortitude to go into these things for yourself. And
Hmm.
I'll tell you what, if I would have believed authorities from day one, I wouldn't be doing this podcast. I would have never gone to Anarchapulco. I would have never got into Walter Russell, which completely challenges physics at its core. He said basically the moon might as well be made of green cheese if you're going to believe in this material science paradigm. And so he also said that removing the creator from its own creation was the cardinal error of science. And in a sense, the creator is mind in this approach. And if you remove your mind out of the equation of life and you let the authorities and the experts into that place, taking the place of your mind, then that's going to be your mind. Your mind will be whatever anybody tells you. And we can see how well that turned out in 2000 or 2020 and 21 and 22, 2001, when we went ballistic and into basically a world war in the Middle East, for lack of a better term.
Hmm.
But if we're ever going to escape this system, and I'd like to get your closing points on this as well, what are the things we're going to have to do? Because number one, I think, as you said, when I came in 2001, like I said, I sort of had health and conspiracy all blended together, because when
Hmm.
I realized people were lying to me, and then I also got some tips from different places that just because I was brave enough to look at the conspiracy, it's like the universe went, okay, brave man, here's a little more. Here's a little more. How about some health? How about look into your sinuses? Why are your sinuses always clogged up? And then I get notmilk.com from a friend of mine. And next thing you know, I stop milk 3 weeks later. I
Hmm.
can breathe without sinus problems. It's like the whole of it just cleared up. And it made sense, to me that, you know, babies are weaned off milk by their mothers after a certain amount of time. So it's
Hmm.
unnatural to be guzzling, large quantities of milk. I still put cream in my coffee, half and half, but it's not large quantities, which is where I think people go wrong in so many aspects. But so we want to get healthy. We want to get our minds right. What are Justin's best, tips and tricks for getting ourselves into that state? And it probably will tie into awakening into consciousness, which I'm really interested to get
Hmm.
your opinion on that. But how does consciousness play a role in coming to the truth, to a higher view of the world, and a healthier living aspect for one's own life?
Hmm. Well, so from my perspective, to me, we live in a world now that is in a state of absolute chaos. The world that we were sold when we're children and the world that we're actually experiencing are two completely different versions of reality. And so the thing is that all this stuff that's being inflicted upon people, the only reason it works is because people aren't conscious of what's really going on. But especially being doing hypnosis for over 20 years, uh, one of one of the things that I've really noticed is that people are really hungry for information. They are waking up. They're starting to really realize that even though they don't know what's really going on, in some cases, people are still asking questions, and the trust in authority is completely gone. It's over. Nobody trusts anybody, and no matter what they're doing, these people now have lots and lots of questions. And for me, I would see that there's probably a third of the world that are completely asleep, and no matter what you do, if grandma gets her booster and drops dead, they'll still drops dead that day. That you'll have people that will still go the next day and still get boosted. They're just in that mindset. Then you've got people that are totally awake, that realize what's going on, and are really helping awaken people. And so there's the other end of that spectrum. But then you've got a third in the middle that don't really know what's going on, but they know that they've been shafted in some way, and they know that no matter what's going on, their quality of life isn't that good. So, and there's a lot of chaos there. And so what I think really needs to happen is that we need to awaken the third up in the middle, but we don't need to awaken the third of those up. If we awaken 10% of those people up, that will be enough of a critical mass that will start to shift the whole perspective of what's really going on in the world. And for me, people are really trapped in their heads. They have so much internal dialogue, and they can't seem to get that to switch off. And there's ways that you can do that. If you've got a minute, I can share a little exercise that'll help people get into a really clear place. It'll help them switch that internal dialogue off inside their heads.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right. So your mind by nature, and I've been meditating for maybe 30 years, you know, it's very rare you'll get this beautiful, serene, perfect meditation. There's always something chattering in your mind. And so it's very difficult to switch off that internal dialogue. So if you're out in nature, like say I live maybe less than half a mile from the sea.
Mhm.
So if I wanted to switch my internal dialogue off, and I used to be able to do this for 20 minutes, I could have no thoughts at all for 20 minutes, and I could do this every day. I just have got out of the way of it. But so say you're walking along the seashore, what you want to do is for about 30 seconds is focus on everything visually that you can see. So you can see the waves in the distance, you can see the seagulls, you can see the pine trees. And you'll do that for 30 seconds, and you immerse your visual part of your consciousness with non-verbal input. Then you'll walk along and you'll do the same for 30 seconds with auditory. So you'll listen, you'll hear the waves crashing on the shore, you'll hear the seagulls, chirping or making noise out, and you'll hear the wind blowing through the trees. And then you'll walk along and you'll feel the sun on your face, you'll feel the wind blowing gently, and you'll feel that breeze, refreshingly, stimulating you. And then you'll be aware the salt air and the taste of the salt air. And then you keep repeating that over every 30 seconds. And what happens eventually is that you absolutely overload your conscious mind with non-verbal information. And eventually what happens is the chattering completely stops, and you're so focused in the present moment. And it's a very beautiful, very profound place to be, because when you get out of your mind, that's when magnificent levels of really powerful healing can take place.
Yeah, that's well said. I think it's Walter Russell had a term for when you're aware of nature but active within it. He said waking meditation. And I love that term because I've never been one for the posturing. I just don't find it to my benefit to sit in the traditional meditative, posture. And I've
Mhm.
addressed this in other work, my Knowing the Creator 101 series, the second uh, episode of that, talk about posture. And basically what I look at that to be is it doesn't matter so much the posture, it's more the process.
Mhm.
That you're taking notice of the world around you, and just it's sort of turning your thoughts off for a minute That's good to do from time to time because your
Mhm,
thoughts will overwhelm you, you know, and obviously a lot of us have worked really hard to get, call it a control of your own mind, if you will. I call it sort of balancing the horizontal by going vertical. You
mhm,
get behind the worry, behind the thinker. You
mhm,
become the knower that commands the thinking as opposed to the thinking commanding the knower. In
mhm,
other words, your opposites are your bitches instead of you being the bitch of the opposites,
mhm,
which are the worry, the happiness, and it's everything in contradiction or in opposition to one another. But having that power to really just breathe, and
mhm,
just be for even short periods of time are so beneficial. And I've definitely, and contemplation is another mode you can say is a form of meditation.
mhm,
Prayer, there's different terms for it, but it's basically being able to sit, still, or just as you're walking, even to simply notice
mhm.
things that aren't the worries or the fears or the constant dialogue inside your head. And that is really where I think the power comes in. But yeah, I like what you said right there. It's very, very helpful, to people to be able to take time wherever you're at to walk on the beach or whatnot. But well, this has been a really great conversation. Are there any other thoughts you'd like to add to it before we start to wrap up?
Just very simply, remember that you are your own highest authority. Your body has this incredible innate ability to heal itself, and you don't need the high priest in the white coat to heal you. The problem is with Google, they have almost obliterated all the information on how to heal yourself naturally. It's just completely corrupt. And one of the things that I see when people get sick and they try to do it holistically, they get bombarded with information, and most of that information coming at them now, if you're getting it on Google, is so corrupted that it's very difficult to do. But the thing is, the simplest things, always trust your intuition. Like for me, like I said earlier, but I went and I got the mercury removed from my teeth. And I would never recommend these, but I've had root canals done and I can have that done. And I haven't had any anesthetic in 20 years, even had all their mercury removed. I can do that without any anesthetic because my unconscious mind will let me turn the pain off because it knows that I will respect it. And remember, your unconscious mind always wants to do what's right for you if you give it choices. Make intelligent choices, trust your intuition, and get back into nature is the best way. And just don't trust authority. And I mean, there may be some people in authority that have good advice, but you have to be very skeptical because most of it's been so corrupted. And the other thing I was going to say that if people want to read my book, I mean, I'm happy to give you. I mean, I think it sells on Amazon for $9.95. If they go to my website, thrivinginotoxicworld.com, and they go to, and pick or hit buy my book and just pick the ebook, and when you go to checkout, if you put in the code OZ or OZ 2020 at checkout, that will then allow you to download it from the website for free. If you're in a position and you can buy it from Amazon, that's great. It helps support me. But if you don't, or you just want to check it out, go to my website and do that. And Matt, you can put the code uh, in the link there, yeah, and hopefully
Yep.
you get value from it, and hopefully if you read that, it really will help people massively understand the complexity of what's going out there, chunk it out into stuff that absolutely really works. If you apply what I've written about in that book, it will be a absolute guarantee a transformative experience in your life because it really does work, because I live it every day and I thrive, and I don't have a creak in my body, and I have incredible health and vitality, and I feel absolutely great. And I just want to say it's absolutely great to be alive.
Yeah, it really is. And, it's so good too to have folks like yourself out there doing the work that you're doing because, not enough attention is given to the body a lot of times. And, all the mystics, one thing they all have in common is, as you rightly said about the import of nature, they all had a relationship with nature.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of that's where that divine wisdom is able to leap from the electrical connection of nature to the electrical mind of man. But yeah, I really, I like you. I just like to say thanks for coming on and a lot of good stuff you shared with us. What do you do to release awakening into consciousness?
Sorry, what do I do?
When are you due to release the
When
book
am I
Awake-
due?
Awakening to
I
Consciousness?
still, I mean, it still could take me another year to do it because
Okay.
I really, sometimes you could research something for 4 hours and you'll get 2 pages. Other times you'll get 2 pages in 2 minutes. And there's so many, I mean, it's such a broad spectrum of stuff, but I can't see it being out this year, but I do try to make it a rule that I write every day for a minimum of 20 to 30 minutes. But it'll come together whenever it's done. And also, I also want to thank you just for having me on the show. Really appreciated it, and I had a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
hopefully, we'll catch up again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. And let me know when it comes out. We'll have to have you back on. And real quick, what is your definition of consciousness?
To me, consciousness is it's connecting to. I'll very briefly give you a short example of what happened. For years, I had been taking lots of drugs. I've been doing different things. I've been reading the works of Carlos Castaneda. I read his books about 50 times.
Mhm.
Now, in all my time of taking all the drugs that I've ever taken in my entire life, once I had this opportunity where I'd taken 2 years off, maybe 30 years ago, and I was walking every day, meditating for 2 or 3 hours, walking my dogs every day. And at one moment, I had this bolt of consciousness hit me. It was so strong that it nearly blew me off the face of the planet. And it freaked me out really a lot because I thought if the government realized I was this conscious, they would murder me immediately. They just wouldn't tolerate somebody having this awareness. But I was in all of the universe all at the same time. And I could have answered any question about anything. And to me, the conscious is the connection to this incredible source of where everything exists and everything can be accessed. But within our human vehicle or body or whatever, we have all these programs, belief systems, and filters that disconnect us from that source. And to me, being a state of absolute present of authenticity and in this present moment, to me, is where you connect with the highest levels of awareness, consciousness, or the expansion of it. And I suppose that's just a loose sort of description from my perspective, and I suppose there's many others.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think it's a great place to close. But again, thank you, Justin, for coming on. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
They can get me through my website, thrivinginaToxicWorld.com. I am on Twitter, although I don't know how it works that well, but I think you can message people on Twitter under just my name, Justin Zalewski.
Okay.
And I mean, if they want, I suppose they could email me at my email address is it's Justin_1470 at protonmail.com.
Very good. And I won't list that under the website because if you do that on a internet, bots grab it up and you'll end up with 10,000 spam emails. So
Yeah, yeah.
write that down, people, pause it, back it up, and you can send Justin a message. And I need to pronounce your name right next time. So
It's fine. Very. It's. You're just pronouncing it phonetically, and if you were in the States, that's how they would pronounce it. It's just
okay.
the English way is the W is pronounced as a V, so it'd be Zalewski rather than Zalewski. But
Zalewski.
I've
Okay.
no attachment to it. It's just
Very
it's like,
good. All right. Well, we'll end this show. You can hang out if you want. And this is a 3-minute song, a little bit over, called The Asking Price. And this was written back in 2005 or 6, if I remember right, from Salem, Missouri. And this is a song about making sacrifice. The sacrifice you make to learn the truth, to make your health more important. All those things are more important to you. When will the sacrifice be? When will the sacrifice be more than the asking price? So we'll leave with that. Thank you, listeners, and we'll see you on the other side.
When will we hear the voice of truth and reasoning? We try to be something that just don't fit. When will we contemplate? Will without the pain, to let love in and throw away the hate. When will the sacrifice mean more than the asking price? Open up the gate so we can find a way. Caught up inside the lies, the truth is right before your eyes. Step into the light so love can break these chains. We turn another page, getting tired of this cage. If I had the key, I would let us all run free. We must take a chance in life. Sometimes we're wrong, sometimes we're right. If you trust in love, the darkness holds no sway. When will the sacrifice mean more than the asking price? Open up the gate so we can find a way. When things get difficult and life seems unbearable, step back, relax and take a deep breath. Sometimes it's hard to see how people give up on their dreams. You've got this life, this chance to make things right. On any given day, when life is painted gray, we can mend our hearts, we need not be afraid. Don't let this world bring you down, it's just a game of lost and found. By living love, we walk above the rain. When will the sacrifice be more than the asking price? Open up the gate so we can find the way. Caught up inside the lies, the truth is right before your eyes. Step into the light so love can break these chains. When will the sacrifice be more than the asking price? Open up the gate so we can find a way. Caught up inside the lies, the truth